بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله يحب التوابين ويحب المتطهرين. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه بعدد ما في جميع القرآن حرفا حرفا وبعدد كل حرف ألفا ألفا. In today's discussion about the back to basics of fiqh, we're talking about ghusl, how to have a bath in accordance to the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah. Because it should be remembered that if you are in major impurity and you need to have ghusl, you need to have a bath, then it's important for you to make sure that you have done the bath properly. Otherwise, your salah will be invalid. Reciting the Holy Quran will not be permissible for you. So that's why one needs to take extreme care in understanding how to do ghusl. So first we'll mention the method of doing ghusl, and then inshallah break it down into what is fard in relation to ghusl, what is necessary for ghusl. So the method of ghusl, before you start doing ghusl, before having a bath, you should have in your heart the intention that I am having a bath so that I become pure, and when I become pure, I can carry out the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First of all, wash your hands up to your wrists 3 times, and then wash the private areas. And after washing the private areas, then if there's impurity or dirt on any part of the body, remove that impurity first. So after you've done this, then wash, do wudu, meaning do everything that you would do for wudu of salah. But if you're in a place where water gathers on, then you should not wash your feet. You should wash your feet afterwards. After you have done, and after you have washed the wudu parts, you should then rub over your entire body with a wet hand, especially in the cold season, so that water easily reaches every part of the body. Then after this, pour water 3 times over the right shoulder, 3 times over the left shoulder, and then over the head, and then 3 times over the entire body, making sure that every single part of the body is washed. Then after you have completed the ghusl, if you had not washed your feet earlier due to water gathering, then you move aside and wash the feet. When you're doing ghusl, you should make sure that you are not facing towards the Kaaba, to the Qibla. If the body parts that are meant to be covered, as in the sitr, which is the navel to the knees, if that area is open during ghusl, then you should make sure that you're not facing towards the Kaaba. Whilst doing ghusl, whilst washing the body parts, you should also be rubbing your hands over the body to make sure that the body parts are being washed thoroughly. You should have a bath in such a place where nobody else can see you. But if you are in a situation where you cannot have a bath where nobody can see you, and this in our time sometimes occurs in gyms and in places where people play sports, then afterwards they are showering in areas where it's not possible for them to have a shower in a cubicle. Instead, they're having to have showers where other people can see them. It's important for them to know that the sitr, meaning from the navel up to and including the knees, has to be covered at all times, even when having a bath in public or having a shower in public. So they have to make sure that they don't open up that area. Secondly, they have to cover that area with a thick cloth, so that for example, if it was a thin cloth, then water would would cause that cloth to become transparent, meaning you could see through the cloth and you can see the body part. So you should have a thick cloth that even if it becomes wet, it still does not show the part that's being hidden by it. After a bath, you are allowed to dry your body parts using a towel or other such cloth, and it's good to perform 2 rakats after having ghusl. Now this was the quick method of ghusl that we mentioned. But in terms of what is fard, what are the fard acts of ghusl? What are the necessary acts of ghusl? This should take us back to discussing what was fard in wudu. So I'm not going to tell you that today. You can look back at what we learnt in relation to wudu. What are the fard actions of wudu? What are those actions that if you did not do them, your wudu would not be valid? So if you're with your children, you should be asking them, how many fard actions are there of wudu and what are they? Now we're learning in relation to ghusl and how many fard actions there are of ghusl. There are 3 actions that are necessary in ghusl. The first is to rinse the mouth. And inshallah we're going to be discussing each of these in detail. So the first is to rinse the mouth. The second is to sniffle water into the nose, inside the nose. And thirdly, to wash every single part of the outer body. So the entire body has to be washed. This is the third fard. So the 3 fard are, firstly, to rinse the mouth. Secondly, to sniff water into the nose. And thirdly, to wash every single part of the outer body. So in terms of rinsing the mouth, it's not enough to simply take a small amount of water, put it into the mouth and spit it back out. In order for the mouth to be properly washed and rinsed, you have to make water reach every single part of the mouth. Right? So every single corner of the teeth and to the end of the throat. All of that part, all of the mouth has to be washed. So water has to reach the areas behind the teeth, the gaps in between the teeth, and all sides of the tongue, and to the, what we would call the brim, the close part of the throat. If you don't have a fast, then you would be gargling, meaning when it's not Ramadan or when it's during the night, then in Ramadan you gargle as well, which is sunnah. But during the fast, you should not be gargling, because by gargling, you're allowing water to go below the throat, and that will invalidate the fast. If there are things stuck between the teeth, those things should be removed in order for the ghusl to be valid, so that the water would reach between the teeth. And that's why flossing and thoroughly cleaning the teeth is always a good thing, and that will allow your ghusl to be valid. But if there's something stuck between the teeth that there'd be fear that it would cause harm if you removed it, then you are forgiven from removing, meaning you don't have to remove such a thing. If you did not realize that there's something stuck between your teeth, like for example, a bit of meat is stuck between your teeth and you didn't realize when you did ghusl, when you had a bath, afterwards you found that this was stuck in the teeth, then you should now rinse the area and make sure water reaches that area. In terms of the salah that you performed, for example, you did ghusl, you performed salah, and afterwards you realized that there's something stuck between your teeth. You've taken it out and you washed your mouth thoroughly. But you don't have to repeat that salah. That salah is valid. And this is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this salah is not affected by that. It's fard to rinse the mouth thoroughly once in ghusl, right? And this is the bare minimum, that you wash the mouth thoroughly once. In terms of sniffing water into the nose, which is the second fard of ghusl, again, quickly splashing a bit of water into the nose will not be enough. Meaning you're splashing water just around the nose or on the outer part of the nose, this is not enough. You have to send water in, you have to sniff water into the nose, and to wash the nose up to the end of the soft bone, before the hard part of the bone starts. So this is by sniffing the water upwards. You have to make sure that the water reaches every part below that. Then we have washing the entire body. It's necessary, it's obligatory to pass water, for water to pass. And you remember what washing means from our discussion about ghusl, because you should have that noted down as well. What is the difference between ghusl and masah? What is the difference between washing and moistening, if you like, or wiping? The difference is that at least 2 drops of water have to flow over that body part for it to be called washing. So now when we say here that it is obligatory to wash every single part of the apparent body, the outer body, from the hair all the way to the feet, every single part of the body has to be washed. There are some body parts that if you're not careful, then they won't be washed. You have to take care to make sure they're washed. And if you do not make sure they're washed, your ghusl will not be done. Now, if you just stick your head under the shower, you just stand under the shower and think, that's it, my ghusl is done, then that is not enough. And that's why it's important for you to understand that there's some body parts that will be missed unless you take care. So from those body parts, we'll mention a few to help you. If a woman's hair are braided, she has to wash to the roots of her hair. She doesn't have to undo the braids. A man should not have the hair braided anyway. But if a man did have his hair braided, it would be necessary for him to undo that and wash the entire hair from the tips to the roots. If a person has, which is again for women, they have their noses and their ears pierced, it's not permissible for men to do so. But if a person has their nose or ear pierced and the hole is open, then it is fard for water to flow through the hole. So you'd have to remove any jewelry that you'd have on that would stop water from reaching that. Every single hair of the eyebrows, of the mustache, and the beard must be washed, right? And if you go back to the discussion about wudu, you'll recall that the hair of the beard only has to be washed thoroughly up to the chin. But in relation to ghusl, it's the entire beard hair have to be washed thoroughly. So from the root to the tip, the entire hair have to be washed, and the skin beneath them. Now the scholars also mentioned within the books about different types of beards. Some people have very thin hair, thin facial hair, meaning the skin is still visible. Then they have to wash the skin as well. They have to get to the skin. And in terms of those who have a thick beard, then they would have to reach to the roots of the hair of the beard. And that would be enough for them, because it would obviously be difficult for them to reach right up to the skin. Wash all parts of the ears and the mouth of the ear canal, meaning the outer part of the ear canal. Make sure that you wash that. The hair behind the ears, if you have long hair, will have to be lifted to make sure that the water reaches behind the back of the ears. The joint between the chin and the throat will not be washed unless you lift your head upwards. Otherwise, that joint will not be washed. And that's why you have to take care to raise the head so that that area is washed. The arms have to be lifted up properly to make sure that the underarms are washed and that water reaches every part of them. If you keep your arm down, then you will not manage to get water to every part of the underarm. Wash all sides of the arms and wash every part of the entire back. If a person has a lot of weight and they have a large stomach, then they have to make sure that the water reaches every part of their belly. Make sure water enters into the navel, meaning the belly button. So you should make sure that water reaches that area. And that's one area, if you don't take care, water will not automatically reach there. Wash every part of the body from the root to the tip. Wash the fold between the thigh and the area beneath the navel. Right? And if you are sitting down and performing ghusl and having a bath, then the thigh and the shin, the area between that, will not be washed unless you take care. So you'd have to raise your leg and make sure that area is washed. Right? And all sides of the thighs should be washed properly, and all sides of the shins. Again, if you don't take care, that will be missed. And so these are some of the body parts. There are others as well that you have to take care to make sure that every single part of that body is washed. So every single outer part of the body has to be washed in order for ghusl to be carried out. If a person has an illness due to which they are wearing a bandage, so they have an issue due to which they're having to wear a bandage, and removing the bandage would cause harm to them, would cause illness to them, or would cause more pain to them, then they are allowed to keep that bandage on. So then you would wipe over that bandage rather than wash. But the important thing is that we should try to make sure that the bandage or the plaster is only covering that area which cannot be washed. Right? Because if washing it would cause harm, so you're covering that with a bandage or a plaster, but only that area should be covered, which would cause harm if it was uncovered. Now, if it's such that you cannot manage to cover that area without covering some extra area, then you should only cover that amount that's needed. And then you would wipe over the bandage. Once you're better and you remove the bandage, then you would wash that area after gaining good health. This was the method of ghusl and the fard actions of ghusl that we mentioned. In terms of the situations in which ghusl is wajib to perform, those are something that would be more suited to a classroom environment. And inshallah, if people have any questions in relation to that, they can send them questions across in relation to when ghusl becomes wajib, so they can contact Al-Markaz Islami and ask them by email or telephone and ask their questions via that platform. In terms of when it is sunnah to perform ghusl, it's sunnah to perform ghusl on Friday, on the days of Eid, so Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, on the day of Arafah, the 9th Dhul Hijjat al-Haram, and when you are about to put on ihram for either Hajj or Umrah. It's mustahab and it's good to perform ghusl when visiting a place of respect and honor, for example, when going to Masjid al-Haram, or when presenting yourself in the court of our Master Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam in Masjid al-Nabawi, and before tawaf, doing ghusl is also mustahab, and it's a good thing. And in the same way, it's mentioned within the works of fiqh that it's mustahab and good to perform ghusl on the night of al-Bara'ah, meaning the 15th night of Sha'ban, and in the same way on the night of power, Laylatul Qadr, which we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us the blessings of in this month. And in the same way, it's mustahab to perform ghusl on the night of Arafah, and for any gathering of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remembrance of His beloveds. And in the same way, it's mustahab, it is good to perform ghusl after giving bath to a deceased person, after doing the ghusl of somebody who's passed away. This question arises often, that people wonder, after I have given ghusl to a mayyit, somebody who passed away, after I have carried out the ritual bath, do I now need to have a bath? And the situation is that you do not need to have a bath after giving ghusl to a mayyit, but it is mustahab, it is good for you to have a bath. If impurity has reached your clothes or your body, then you would have to remove the impurity. In the same way, it's mustahab and good for a person to do ghusl after regaining consciousness. So either if he lost his senses or if he fainted, then when he becomes conscious again, it's a good thing for him to do ghusl. And in the same way, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid, if somebody drank alcohol or took drugs and became intoxicated, then after they become sober from that, then for them to do ghusl, right? And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our brothers and sisters from the disease and from the dirt of intoxication. In the same way, when you're repenting from a sin, it is good and mustahab for a person to do ghusl. For wearing new clothes, it's also mustahab to do ghusl. And on returning from a long journey, it's a good action that is worthy of reward, but it's not necessary for you to do ghusl. You can make several intentions in one ghusl. So for example, if ghusl was wajib upon you, it was necessary upon you to do ghusl, and it was also Friday as well. Now you can do ghusl with the intention of fulfilling the fard, the wajib action of ghusl, that you're getting rid of the impurity, the state of impurity from yourself. And on the other hand, you are also doing ghusl to fulfill the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that you are fasting, you are having a bath on Friday. So you can do both intentions in one ghusl. So it would not be that you do your wajib ghusl and then later on you say, I want to do ghusl again now to make sure that I do the sunnah ghusl of Friday. That one ghusl that you do, you can make both intentions in that. There are some rules in which you can't make two intentions for one thing, and that's why you shouldn't assume from this about other things, right? So for example, some other actions such as like for today, for example, we are fasting the fast of Ramadan, then we cannot also make intention of nafil as well. So we can't combine the nafil and fard intention for fasting. So that's why you should not make analogy, you should not assume from one ruling that the same would apply to another ruling. Unfortunately, that happens with many people, that they hear a ruling or they read a ruling about one thing and they think they can apply it elsewhere as well. And that's not the case. And that's why the Quran says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. So you need to be aware that these rules apply differently in different circumstances. In terms of what you can and cannot do whilst in the state that ghusl is wajib upon you, is necessary upon you. If ghusl is necessary upon you, then it is haram for you to enter a masjid, and it's haram for you to perform tawaf of the Holy Kaaba. It's haram for you to touch the Holy Quran, but it's also haram for you to recite the Holy Quran, even if you're not touching it. It's haram for you to write a verse of the Holy Quran, and especially if that involves you touching the paper whilst writing down the verse of the Holy Quran. You're not allowed to touch or wear a ring that has the Holy Quran written on it. If you are in a state that ghusl is wajib upon you, but you pick up the Holy Quran indirectly, meaning you pick it up with a separate cloth, then this is allowed. But the key word here is that it is a separate cloth. So you cannot pick up the Quran with your sleeve, using your sleeve as a barrier and saying, oh, I'm indirectly picking up the Mus'haf of the Holy Quran, because that sleeve is attached to your body. But if you, for example, took off the same shirt that you have on, now that shirt is now separate from your body, it's no longer attached. You could cover the Holy Quran, the Mus'haf of the Holy Quran, with that shirt and pick it up. Or you could pick up the Holy Quran with a handkerchief. So in worst case scenarios where you need to pick up the Holy Quran, the Mus'haf of the Holy Quran, to move it whilst you're in the state that ghusl is wajib upon you, you should do so indirectly in this way. In terms of reciting the Holy Quran off by heart when you don't have wudu, you will recall that that is allowed. You are not allowed to touch the Holy Quran without wudu. But when it comes to ghusl, if ghusl is wajib upon you, then you are not allowed to recite the Holy Quran with the intention of recitation of the Holy Quran. But there are some verses of the Holy Quran that are also dua as well. They are supplication. And a person in the state of ghusl is allowed to do dua in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that person will be allowed to, for example, recite Surah Al-Fatiha with the intention of dua, not with the intention of recitation of the Holy Quran. In the same way, if he hears bad news and he says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, indeed to Allah we belong and to Him we return, then again, the intention should not be of tilawah of the Holy Quran, but rather it should be to mention these words as a reminder. So, and there's similar verses that are in the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they should be read with the intention of praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, Ayatul Kursi and the last three verses of Surah Al-Hashr, Huwallahu alladhi la ilaha illahu. These verses are praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he can recite these verses with the intention of praise, but not with the intention of tilawah of the Holy Quran, reciting the Holy Quran. In terms of the quls, right, the famous, the Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun, Surah Al-Kafirun, Surah Al-Ikhlas, and the Mu'awwidhatayn, the two surahs, Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Al-Nas, he should recite them, or she should, both male and female, this applies to, when they're in such a state that ghusl is wajib upon them, then they cannot recite these verses unless they do not recite the qul. So they don't say the word qul. And then it will be a dua. For example, in terms of the qul, in terms of Surah Al-Ikhlas, so you remove qul and you say Huwa Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. So you're praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in terms of the Mu'awwidhatayn, you're saying A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq. Right? So you're doing dua, I seek refuge with the Lord of the Falaq. And in the same way, it is haram to touch the Holy Quran or any Quranic verse without wudu. However, there is no harm in reciting it up by heart, which we've already discussed. It's haram to you, it is makruh at tahrimi to use such utensils like plates and cups that have the Holy Quran written upon them. But if the Holy Quran is written upon them and you are in a state that ghusl is wajib upon you, you are not allowed to touch such plates, right, and such cups. And in the same way, if you don't have wudu, you're not allowed to touch such utensils. The ruling that applies to touching the Holy Quran also applies to touching the translations of the Holy Quran in other languages. Right? You are not allowed to touch them. Translations as well without wudu. And if you're in a state that ghusl is wajib upon you, you are most certainly not allowed to touch those book translations. In terms of general Islamic books, you are allowed to read them and touch them whilst you are in a state that ghusl is wajib upon you, or whilst you're not in wudu, because being pure is not a condition to read them. However, it's respectful that you be pure when you're reading them. To gain the blessings of knowledge, al-ilmu nur, ilm is a light. To gain the blessings of the knowledge, one should be in wudu. And it's a good thing to always be in the state of wudu. So when learning especially, one should be in the state of wudu. But this is a good thing, it's not necessary, and it's mustahab to be in the state of wudu when touching books of Islamic knowledge. In terms of reciting salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, without and reciting du'as generally whilst ghusl is wajib upon you, this is permissible. However, it's preferable that you rinse your mouth or you do wudu at least before you do this. And again, you would want to recite salawat in the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the most respectful of ways. And therefore, you should try to do ghusl as soon as possible so that you can be pure when reciting the salawat. But the main point that you realize from this is that when a person comes into a state that ghusl becomes wajib upon them, it does not mean that they are not allowed to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now. Right? It does not mean that now is the time for them to move away from remembrance of Allah. They are still allowed to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are still allowed to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are still allowed to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they are not allowed to recite the Holy Quran. So these are the basics of ghusl that we've discussed today. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten our hearts with true understanding of the deen. There's one clarification that I wanted to make from last week about wudu and the things that break the wudu and invalidate the wudu. And the reason why we need to make this clarification is so that it's absolutely clear. When we mentioned that wudu becomes invalid by tears flowing from infections, the key word there is tears flowing due to infections that are caused by an infectious eye. So for example, when somebody has conjunctivitis, there are continuous flowing fluid coming out. So if you don't want to describe it as tears, you could describe it as fluid. That fluid that comes out due to the infection and it flows, that makes the wudu invalid. As for the tears that come out anyway, so when somebody's crying, then those tears that come out that are not due to infection, they do not make the wudu invalid. So for example, somebody is performing salah and they begin to cry and their tears flow, then they should not think that their wudu has become invalid, but rather that does not invalidate the wudu. And there's other such details that one would need to understand. Right? That's why understanding each and every key word is important. And like I always say, if it was a classroom environment, you'd be able to ask immediately and raise any and remove any doubts. But in the current scenario, the main thing is that if you have any questions, you put them forward to us so that we can clarify them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enlighten our hearts with true knowledge of the deen and grant us the ability to act upon what we learn. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all in this month of Ramadan, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us forgiveness in these 10 days of maghfirah. آمين بجاه النبي الكريم. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.